Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast, hosted by Healey. Healey is a licensed counselor with a passion for helping Christians live healthier lives, emotionally and spiritually. Each episode combines the truth of God's Word with practical advice to help you in your everyday life. Whether you want to grow emotionally, strengthen your faith, or handle life challenges with more peace, this podcast is for you. We're so glad you've joined us. Let's get started.
To God be the glory. Hi, friends. I am so happy you joined me today. Today, we're going to be talking about coping skills. Actually, the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about coping skills and why we need them. Why are they important? Oftentimes, we have a lot of emotions that can be troubling to us. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, to be emotionally healthy, one of the things we have to do is take responsibility for our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. And to do that, we have to learn to manage each of those, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So coping skills are simply the things we do to cope with stressful or troubling situations. So we interpret a situation to be stressful or threatening or something, and then we want to do something to change that because we don't want to have situations that are stressful or threatening, right? So our efforts to control that are coping skills. So we normally work to change the problem or our interpretation of that circumstance. So we look at two coping strategies specifically, or two coping types. One is problem focused and one is emotion focused. So problem focused coping works to change the circumstance. So whatever the problem is, that's what we're working to change. And then emotion focused is we're working to change the emotion or the thinking that we have around the circumstance. So, for example, now this is going to be extremely hypothetical, okay? But let's just say that work is stressing you out. Maybe there are lots of unrealistic expectations that the management's putting on you. It's causing you to feel angry, overwhelmed, frustrated, bitter, depressed. So if you are looking at the issue from a problem-focused coping, you might work harder or work late. You might have a conversation with the boss. Remember, these are things that you're trying to change the problem, okay? So you might talk to others to see if your situation is normal or it makes sense, or if they are unrealistic expectations. You might, if it goes on too long, you might even look at transferring to a new department or actually even getting a new job. So those are all things that you're trying to address the problem. You're coping in a way to address the problem. If you're emotion focused, you work at changing the feelings you have about the stress. Okay, so you might do something like encouraging yourself. Remember, you're trying to change the emotions related to the problem. So you might encourage yourself. You might try to think differently about the situation, or think differently about the boss, or think differently about the work demands. You might try to take a walk at break time to re-energize yourself. You might listen to some good music on break to try to get yourself to feeling better. Maybe on your off time you get a massage, or you do other things to help yourself feel better. So basically you're trying to manage your emotions around the stress. And each situation that we have will call for different strategies. So in this example, like, you could definitely try to change the problem if it's something within your control. So having to talk with your supervisor to explain that the work demand is higher than what is reasonable is a good first step. But if he says, too bad, there's nothing he can do about it, and it's a job that you actually want to keep, managing your emotions would be a better place to go after that. Think about your last difficult situation that brought on a lot of stress for you. So think about that situation where you had tons of stress. Did you cope with the problem by being problem focused or emotion focused? Were you trying to change your emotions around the problem, or were you trying to change the problem? So that's just an easy way to look at a situation. And it's important to kind of be aware of these so you can actually look at. So if you're typically a problem focused person, but it's not something that you can actually change, and you just keep trying to be problem focused, resolve the problem, but it's nothing that you have control over, that's going to be very frustrating and actually make you more stressed. But if it's nothing, if you can realize that it's something that you don't have control over, then you can become emotion focused and go, okay, I just need to change the way that I feel about this situation. What's not healthy if you don't do either of those, you don't try to change your emotion and you don't try to change the situation, like that's going to lead you into more stress, more overwhelm, and chronic stress actually can affect you physically. We know it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression. So there are lots of bad things about chronic stress. Stress in itself is not bad, but if it's chronic and it's just all for all this time, that's going to affect us somehow in a negative way. So we need to kind of analyze the way that we look at situations and then decide which is the best way to go. Sometimes we can address a problem situation by doing both. We work to change our emotions, and we also do within our control what we can with the problem. Focusing again on coping skills. So coping specifically can be done in healthy or unhealthy ways. And we just talked about the way that we actually look at the problem. But the actual skills we do to handle it is important, and we have to determine whether we're handling those in healthy or unhealthy ways. So people usually get into problems if they cope with stressful situations in an unhealthy way. And that is usually when they show up to the counseling office, they've had tons of things that they've tried and they haven't worked, or they're simply things that they've tried, but they're unhealthy. And, you know, a lot of times when I talk to people and ask them, so how have you coped with this so far? Typically the answer, well, I haven't. That's why I'm here. But when we dig a little deeper, there's always things that they've done that they've tried to do to resolve it. I mean, and most of the time, these things that they've tried have not either been healthy or not helpful. You know, we can handle a stressful situation by yelling at our spouse or kicking the dog, but that's not very helpful. That's not healthy either. That's not going to help the situation, but that is a coping skill, just not one I recommend or one that is going to be helpful. Unhealthy coping skills, including the ones I just mentioned, might be drinking, using drugs, gambling, excessive behaviors that are even good things, but they're excessive, things like eating or shopping or exercise. Unhealthy behaviors also include behaviors that are risky, or if you withdraw from people, or a breaking of routine. So like maybe you're not taking a shower like you used to, or you're skipping work or things like that. Letting the emotions reign, so maybe you're yelling a lot or being depressed, or you're mean or grumpy, maybe you're hitting things or people. These all have their own reasons for being unhealthy, although some of them are kind of obvious. But suppressing emotions or letting them go with no management at all is unhealthy. Unhealthy coping skills usually do work in the short term. Long term, though, they may create more problems. For example, drinking to suppress the emotion or help you not feel so bad. I mean, technically that does work. The drinking does work. It will suppress the emotion. It will help you feel more relaxed, or the emotion won't feel as intense. I mean, this is why a lot of people use drinking as a coping skill. But it only works in the short term. Long term, it creates more problems. You might create an addiction, or your relationships might start suffering. If it keeps going, the law might get involved, or situations at work might happen because of that. And then it will always long term affect your health at some level. Plus, as we talked about last time, it's going to affect your sleep. And if your sleep isn't good, it's going to affect your emotional health. So it's so important not to have unhealthy coping skills. It's important to be able to identify what you're using to cope and if it's healthy or unhealthy, because that's going to help us create new habits. Healthy coping skills are ones that are usually a lot harder to actually implement, but they work to our benefit long term and short term. It only works in the short term, though, if you're willing to work through the emotion. And I can't remember if we talked about this in the emotion episode that we did, but working through the emotion and not allowing yourself to be afraid of the emotion, but actually allowing yourself to feel it. Managing it, though, means we don't just let the emotion run rampant. We can feel it for a little bit, but then learn how to work ourselves back out of it so we're not getting ourselves into anxious places or depressed places. But that's why it's so important to learn to manage your emotions, because this is a really important part of healing and a really important part of coping. It's so important to allow ourselves to face it, to feel it, and manage it. Because if we don't, it just gets bigger and bigger, and then it gets harder and harder. But let me encourage you. Even if you've been hiding from an emotion for 20 years or something, don't be afraid to face it just because it's been a long time. You are in a different place than when it happened, and you are able to manage it. It just takes some practice. It is hard, but to be healthy, we have to do the hard stuff. One of the things I say in counseling a lot is healthy is hard. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. I wished everybody would do it, or at least try it, because it does get easier the more that we do it. The hard stuff, practicing the hard stuff, is good for us. Good coping skills look like things like deep breathing, meditation on scripture, grounding techniques, relaxation techniques, journaling, volunteering, prayer. Other things that we've talked about is eating right, exercise, getting the right amount of sleep. Those are all healthy ways to cope with things. One of the other ways, in thought replacement or cognitive shifts, that's healthy, and we're going to talk about that one. Muscle relaxation, did I mention that one? And one of the more easy things to implement is identifying something that you really enjoy doing, a hobby, something like if you enjoy fishing or painting or coloring or writing or reading, integrating one of your healthy hobbies into a coping skill so that you have a place, once you've allowed yourself to feel the feeling for a bit, that you can go and do your hobby that restores your soul, so to speak. It helps you to feel re-energized and remotivated and just restored to be able to handle things. What is your healthy hobby? What is something that you really enjoy doing? Maybe you haven't done it for a long time. Maybe you don't even know what you enjoy doing. That's a great homework assignment, of finding out something that you enjoy. And maybe that's just looking at the past and seeing what you used to enjoy and trying those things and see if those work. If not, try something new. Like just Google hobbies. There are so many hobbies and something out there that you really enjoy. The great thing about hobbies can not only be a coping skill, but they can be a preventative. Because when you're doing something and investing some time, it doesn't have to be a whole lot of time, but a little bit of time, into something that you enjoy, that will keep at bay a lot of the unhealthy thoughts and feelings. I recognize that a lot of people have kids, and it's hard sometimes when you have a lot of children or even one child, like sometimes it's just hard to do that, but find something that you might enjoy doing with them, or they might, like biking or walking or hiking, or especially things outdoor can be so helpful. And sometimes just being outside can be a coping skill. If nature, and research shows that nature helps us feel better and can reduce a lot of negative symptoms, I would encourage you just to go sit outside and sit outside with your child. But maybe even sitting down and playing with them or doing some activity with them can be helpful for you. But I think if we want to teach our kids good coping skills, we have to do good coping skills so they can learn how to do it as well. So one of the I mentioned relaxation techniques, I mentioned deep breathing. I would like to just talk a little bit about why deep breathing is so helpful. And it's really funny because a lot of times people come to counseling and I'll ask them, if they've seen a counselor before, like what the other counselor taught them, what they learned about, whatever issue they're facing, things like that. And they normally mention deep breathing because most therapists use it because it is very helpful. And research shows it's very helpful. Many clients will actually tell me that even though they know the skill, they don't use it much because they haven't found it helpful. And I'm normally challenged to teach them how to do it in the right way, because oftentimes if you don't get your breathing down, it can actually put you into a place that you're trying to avoid, a panic attack, or feeling lightheaded or gross or scared or whatever. So it's really important to learn how to do deep breathing properly. So I do want to teach you that, but I do want to share with you why deep breathing works first. So we all have a heart rate, right? We all have a heart, and we have a heart rate. So our heart beats so many times per minute. And this normally is measured if you have a Fitbit, not to do a promo for them, but if you have a Fitbit or some other device that you wear on your wrist, it normally keeps a tally of your heart rate. And that's so important to know, because let me just share a little study with you that they did. So, and this is from the Psychological Effects of Combat by Dave Grossman and Bruce Seidel. This is from a textbook. They did a study on this, and they kind of showed it in a little diagram. I actually have it in my book, but you could Google it too and see. And it basically shows the effects of the heart rate, like what's happening to us. So a normal resting heart rate is about 60 to 80. And I can't really emphasize enough how important it is to kind of watch yours so that you can kind of know what is your normal resting heart rate. And if it's too high, just not freaking out about it, but just noticing what normally helps me bring it back down. So let me tell you, when I have at times, I'll notice I'm like, my heart rate's like going really fast, and it's like no particular reason. I'm just sitting there. And normally, because my heart rate is so low when I'm in session, if I'm outside of session and my heart rate's high, and I'm not exercising or anything like that, I'm just like sitting there and it gets really high, I will have someone just tell me a story. And normally, I don't know if I've trained my body like this or like what's going on, but listening for some reason lowers my heart rate tremendously. So sometimes if I notice it really high for no reason, I'll just have someone like tell me a story. And that'll normally drop it. I have been amazed that works so well. But I identified where's my heart rate the lowest other than sleeping. It's in my therapy office, which seems weird, right? It seems counterintuitive. Like, it seems like I might be stressed hearing all these things, but apparently not. But this is why it's so important to know yourself and to kind of gauge your heart rate. Like, when is it the lowest? When is it the highest? And trying to implement some practices and being able to bring it down. So deep breathing, of course, brings it down too. But okay, so 60 to 80 beats per minute is the normal resting heart rate. When you get it about 115 beats per minute, your fine motor skills start to deteriorate. Okay. And then about 115 to 145, like that's optimal survival and combat performance for complex motor skills, visual reaction time, and cognitive reaction time. So it's kind of like peak of, if you're in that range and you need to do something to survive, you're going to be like on the ball, right? So like, I don't know, sometimes like I've been amazed at if I'm somewhere and like something falls, I'm able to just grab it really fast, or something's at me and I block it. Like, that's kind of at that place where you just got fast reactions and you can physically do some great things. 155, so that was 115 to 145. At 155, your complex motor skills start to deteriorate. So I wouldn't be able to block something off, right? I wouldn't be able to catch something really quick. At 175, your cognitive processing deteriorates. You lose your peripheral vision. You kind of have tunnel vision. You lose your depth perception. Your close-up vision kind of deteriorates. And if you're above 175, you experience irrational fight or flight. You freeze. You become very submissive. Your bladder or bowels may have issues, and the good thing, your gross motor skills, that's at the highest performance level. So that's probably the bear is standing in front of you, and all you could do is run, and you'll run the fastest you've ever ran in your life. I don't think you're supposed to run from a bear, but if there's something you're supposed to run from, you'll probably run the fastest you can of your life. Or, I think, like, I've heard stories about like moms picking up cars and stuff off their children. Like, I don't know if that's accurate, but that you will be able to do some motor skills pretty great. So basically, as your heart rate increases, your cognitive ability goes down. And that is why when you're feeling anxious, you're overwhelmed with your emotion. And sometimes you might just freeze. Maybe you don't even have emotion. Maybe you don't have anything. You can't, because you can't think. Your executive functioning, as you continue to, your heart rate continues to beat faster, your cognitive abilities go down. So one of the most important things we can do is to get our heart rate back down to a normal resting rate, or at least back down where our cognitive abilities aren't compromised, okay? So breathing, deep breathing, and learning how to do this is a key to getting your heart rate back down. And I normally encourage clients when I'm first introducing them to deep breathing, even if they've done it before, I'm always like, just humor me, right? I encourage them to take my little sheet that tells how to do it correctly and just practice at night when you go to bed. Because we're trying to relax anyway when we're going to bed, and we're already relaxed. So it's an easy place to try that. But I normally just encourage them to do or practice the deep breathing when they're not anxious, when the heart rate's already pretty low. And that way they can get really good at it. They know how to do it. And this is like, deep breathing is one of the most effective ways to reduce the feelings of being anxious. So it's really one that we need to master. And even you can use it if you're really angry or very fearful about something or whatever. Like if you want to think clearly, you're going to have to slow that heart rate down. So it's so important to have the skill of deep breathing and to really practice it well so that you can use it when you need it. But first, practice it when you don't need it, and then you'll be able to use it when you do need it. Okay, so I just want to talk through this with you, and I want you to practice with me. If you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're at home and you've got about a minute or 30 seconds, well, or less, or more, maybe lay down and just practice it laying down like you would if you were going to bed. And I want you to put one hand on your belly and then close your mouth and inhale quietly through your nose. And you can count to 4 mentally or just breathe in as much as you can. And then pause just ever so small and then exhale through your mouth. So you're actually going to blow. And normally people say to count to 4. Don't be stressed out about that part. Like the box breathing, like it's very, structured and all that. I don't think you need to do all that. Like the most important thing is to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, and practice that regardless if you're counting or not. I just want you to focus on your breath. So don't worry about counts. Don't worry about all that stuff. You just pay attention to your breath, and you're going to pay attention to your belly. So we don't want your chest rising. We want your belly rising, okay? Because the diaphragm is actually below the lungs, okay? So we want our belly to be rising and falling, okay? So we're going to breathe in through our nose and then out through our mouth. So let's just do that together. You don't have to worry about staying with me. Just do it on your own and just do a deep breaths, okay? So it's going to be very controlled in and out. Your belly should rise and your belly should go down. So in your nose and out your mouth. So during that process, you can just keep breathing, and I'll just talk over your breathing. But just in your nose and out your mouth, and just focus on your breathing. And if you're distracted, especially when you go to bed at night with all the things you need to do or all the things you didn't do, this is a really good practice to help get your brain to focus. Focus on your breath. If your mind wanders to something else while you're breathing, just bring it back to your breath. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be focused on my breath. In the nose and out the mouth. Just paying attention to your belly rising and falling. Just practice that. And then as you continue to practice breathing, you will get better at that. You'll be able to pull it up in situations that you need it. And even more importantly, you're helping your brain. You are guiding your brain, your thoughts, to be where they're supposed to be, on your breath. Because this is one of the things, we let our mind just wander, and we go down 10 trillion rabbit trails when we're trying to sleep or trying to focus. But we're going to train our brain, our thoughts. They go where we say they go. We don't just let them wander We're going to take them where they need to be. And so that's why deep breathing is a great exercise. It's going to lower our heart rate. It's going to help us relax. And we are going to be practicing guiding our thoughts where they need to be. Because that's some of the things that we're going to talk about in future episodes. Getting control of our thoughts. I wanted to thank you for breathing with me today. I hope if you have any questions on this, well, you could probably just Google and find all the information, but feel free to email me and ask me any questions about this. But again, the most important thing is just deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. The next few weeks, we're going to be talking about some different coping skills. And specifically, we're going to do, I think, meditation and prayer next week, and how to integrate scripture with that. And we're going to need our deep breathing to be mastered so that we'll be able to use that together with the meditation and the prayer and bringing our heart rate down. Oh, goodness, we're going to be so healthy, we're not going to know what to do. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to be here, but most importantly, working on your emotional health. I pray that your spiritual life grows because of what you're doing here. And I just thank you so much for joining me, and I pray that God uses this to help you to manage your emotions, to live out your calling of being healthy and redeemed. Thank you again for joining me, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time.